Okay, so these are going to be handmade cards for like thank you cards or gifts or something. I've made a few already to start with. They're just on like a cardstock or these are probably more of like a Canson drawing paper, like a heavyweight drawing paper. So this is, I start with collage, so I start with the paper, and then I just use Mod Podge or even glue stick to stick them down. These are done with Mod Podge tissue paper, or like the patterns or things like that work much better with Mod Podge. And I think in general most things do, they just stick better. The only thing with even the matte Mod Podge is that it creates a little bit of a shiny surface that may not absorb. So I try not to cover it. I just try to do the Mod Podge underneath. But it's worked out fine both ways. So here I've decided just to do a voice recording over because I got a little distracted. So I'm looking at some inks. I'm using some liquid inks from Bombay. I think they're the Dr. P.H. Martins, and I'm choosing to go with, I don't remember what color this is, turquoise, and I think I'm just going to smear that around with my fingers. This is the part where I use something a little more transparent, even though it's dark in color. It's transparent, so it kind of smooshes out the edges of the collage element, so there's a little bit more blending together without it becoming opaque over it and covering the writing or the details of the collage elements. So continuing to use the India ink, and then going to Golden High Flow liquid paint, and I think that is the green gold. Love that color. It is pretty expensive in this bottle, but it's 1 fluid ounce, and I have not gone through it in a very long time. So it kind of creates this beautiful, well, greeny gold color. And just continue with that translucent idea of blending the elements together with color, but not covering them completely to opaqueness. So that's what I'm doing with these. Again, this is a liquid golden. Again, you don't need very much. It goes a long way. You can water down like a cheaper version of an acrylic paint to experiment with and get the same feeling. I'm using a very textured, rough brushing technique here just to get some of that spread out. With what color was that? This is the magenta, quinacridone magenta from Golden. And those taped elements were just to try to keep it in one place so I didn't move it out of the line of sight. So just trying to make sure I get all the paint in there. I'm talking about, there's a little piece of collage element there that's pretty like a homemade paper, and so it's a little bit fuzzy. Yep, just continuing to move around the page, getting a feel for some depth and both blending and creating bold elements. I'm going to use this China marker, which is a wax pencil, like a pencil crayon, and just create some dark line interest. I do fake writing. They're not a word. And then I do some shapes. Again, this is just thinking in terms of contrast. So black elements create more depth and contrast, pushing things to the back or bringing them to the foreground. I try to think that way in terms of black and white. That's what I use black, either paint or pencils or charcoal to do. And then I use white. Now I'm going to white gesso using my super messy, chunky, I can't even think of the word what it's called, but it's the paint blender thing, scooper outer. So I'm just going over, and you can just see how it catches the texture in the papers. It catches the texture in the paint. I'm going over pretty lightly, and some areas I'm blending in to kind of push them back more, and some of them I'm just leaving rough and sitting on the surface. But that's what I'm doing there on the side, is just blending it so it kind of blends in with that turquoise, blends with the green. So it's not so stark, because I'll continue to add layers as we go. Now I want to create a little bit more depth. I'm using more of that golden magenta, just to continue creating the contrast of colors. So it's, and the idea behind that, I'm just using a napkin, is just making sure that these aren't creating hard lines, that they are like even though the magenta over there on the left is kind of stark against the white, that's what I'm doing there, is I'm adding some teal now, the golden teal, to create this blending, so that there are no hard lines of like, here's the magenta, here's the green, here's the teal, and but they all kind of bleed and blend together. And I use your finger and use a brush. And now this is the fluorescent. I forget, this one is just Master's Touch Fine Art Acrylic, and it's a fluorescent yellow. And I really like the fluorescent elements because it does just give that great pop of color. And you don't really have to blend them. And this is a really translucent paint. So it doesn't want to block out anything. It just wants to pop out and be another bit of color. And so I'm deepening that green a little bit with the green gold. And like, again, and like that didn't really work with that brush, so I'm just using a napkin because I want it to, again, work together to blend into the magenta or the teal. Just continuing to blend. And now I'm using that teal to really pop out, to really come forward and come toward you. So pushing all those other blended colors more to the back and bringing the teal forward. And as you can see, I've lost a lot of the black China marker that is behind it, but you can kind of see it. And so it's still adding interest while playing in the background. I don't know what I'm shaking up right now. Okay, so I got the China marker back out to bring back some of those things. And that's the thing about this. You can always bring back, you'll notice later as I go on, this particular element that I just did, those bumpies, I don't really love it. I try to salvage it a couple times, and then you'll see what I do at the end. So now my mind is thinking in terms of the finishing touches. So I'm using this Liquitex fluorescent giant pen, creating textural elements with more fluorescent. It's a very easy way to make your eye move around and not get lost in it kind of breaks up the blendy parts. And then I'm going to use a bold white. Like I said, the white and the black for me, I always think in terms of creating that contrast I'm looking for, making your eye move around the page without it being too crazy busy. That's always a hard balance for me. I get a little overwhelmed sometimes by that. So that's why it's really nice to work small like this. And then dots. So when you think of texture for the last elements, I always think of the lines or dots or just the fake writing. That's where my mind lands usually, of how can I finish up this piece. And then I always kind of squint at all my work to see, do I have enough contrast? And it kind of makes things, the contrast show me whether it's having enough movement and whether it has enough, but it's not an exact science. So at some point you just have to be done. So again, here I'm adding more contrast by those lines, making your eyes stop on certain things is really valuable in any kind of painting. And what else? Now I've decided to get this Posca marker as blue because I'm really not, I want some more color. I don't want to just do black and white, so I'm hoping this will work. The Posca paint markers are really great for that. So this was the part like I was not loving those little loopy bumpy things, and so I went over them in that, and then I'm already feeling like, ugh, that was a mistake. I don't love that either, but I have to wait for it to dry a little bit before I can do anything. So just gonna add a couple little dots because it's a really pretty blue, and it's something that has the same tone as the black, but it's not black. So as you can see, it's just kind of taking shape into something sort of finished looking. Again, it's abstract, and so I'm using the Faber-Castell big pit pens, which I love because you can blend them around, but still didn't rescue that. So now I'm going to go back and get some white gesso and just kind of push that. It just pushes it to the background. It gets rid of the straight bold lines and just pushes it back, but it's still there to add some interest, curiosity, like what was there. And when you're holding these in your hands, you get to enjoy the feeling of them and looking for what's there, what's underneath all the layers. That's why I love giving these as cards, as gifts, because they're a little piece of artwork for you. Just going back over that with the fluorescent so it really stands out a little bit more boldly. And they're looking about done. A little drying and wiggling around, and hope you enjoyed it.